hello to everyone in South Africa. I have to say that your country is one that I cannot wait to visit when we get back to some kind of normality. Thank you for joining us here this evening, and a big welcome and thank you to best-selling author Kristin Hannah, who's here to answer as many of your questions as we have time for. I'm Trisha Jackson, and I'm extremely proud to be Kristin's UK publisher. It's evening here, and we're talking to Kristin, who lives in Seattle, where she's just starting her day. Kristin has sold over 20 million books in nearly 50 languages worldwide, and her novels have captured the hearts of millions of readers across the world. And it's wonderful to know that she's also got so many fans in South Africa. It's a particularly exciting time for Kristin with Wild out now, but also her earlier bestseller, the wonderful Firefly Lane, has been made into a TV series which will be screened on Netflix early in 2021. And then her powerful and heart-wrenching novel, The Nightingale, set in occupied France in the Second World War, has seen so much love and attention worldwide that it is soon to be made into a major movie starring Elle and Dakota Fanning. And then The Four Winds, coming out in February next year, which is already gaining a huge amount of attention and early praise. It's a book we cannot wait to publish, and Kristin will be telling you more about that later on. Kristin, hello to you. You've got lots of fans among readers and booksellers out there. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get to the questions, please?
Sure. Hello to everybody, and I'd really like to thank my publisher and all of my readers in South Africa. It is so exciting to virtually meet you. I wish I could actually be there in person to say hello. I have been to South Africa, and I have to say I adore it down there, and I can't wait to get back. And a little bit about myself. I've been writing, I guess, for a long time now. And I guess I'm just waiting to answer specific questions for you and tell you as much as I can about what's coming and what's been.
Right, well, let's get to the questions then. So the first one is from Mongezi Maboza. Mongezi says, I love your books. Does your husband read your work before it gets published? Is he interested in your writing or just leaves it up to you?
Thank you so much. That's such a nice question. My husband does not read my books before publication. He puts in a lot of time on research trips and following me around the globe and listening to me obsess as I work things through. So I think he has a pretty good idea of what the books are before they get published, but I don't have him read them until the very, very end. He really likes, he's a book in his hand kind of guy.
Thank you. And then the next question is from Paul Robertson. Paul asks, have you watched any episodes of the TV series adaptation of Firefly Lane yet? What were your thoughts? I'd love to know this question.
Oh, hi, Paul. Yes, I have. I have watched all 10 episodes of season 1. It wasn't quite finished. I think the music wasn't right and they had some things left to do, but it was amazing. And even having known the story as well as I did, I found myself sort of at the edge of my seat waiting to see what would happen. They have a remarkable cast. Katherine Heigl, Sarah Chalk, Ben Lawson, John Necker. And so it's just really come together beautifully. I can't wait for everybody to see it.
Well, it's a wonderful book. It's one of my very favorites, and the story of best friends and Kate and Tully. It's a very, very compelling read. Thank you. So the next question is from Tammy White. Love your book, says Tammy. Reading Wild at the moment. Have you ever thought of writing a sequel or prequel to The Nightingale?
Oh, thanks, Tammy. You know, I get that question a lot. Actually, I get that question on all of my books. People constantly want to know more about my characters and what happens later in their life. The only time I've ever directly written a sequel was for, let's see, Firefly Lane, I guess. I wrote a sequel called Fly Away. And I always knew that the Firefly Lane story wasn't over when I finished it. In fact, I envisioned 3 books originally. So that's the only time I've really done it. And I have to say, I found it very difficult. You know, you're tied into what you've already done. You don't have a full toolbox to work with, and you can't just go anywhere you want. So I never say never, but I don't foresee writing a prequel or a sequel to The Nightingale right now.
Thank you. And then Hasina Hajat, do you find naming your characters difficult, and how do you do it?
Hasina, you know, it's kind of part of the magic of writing, this naming of characters. You think you can just, you know, pick whatever name you like and go on, and sometimes that works. But I'm one of those authors who the name and the character are sort of really inextricably entwined. And if I get the name wrong, then it, you know, usually presents itself at some point, and I have to do some kind of renaming along the way. I do, when I'm out naming in the first place, I first sort of look at era and ethnicity, and, you know, what are the common names that children born in the era that I'm talking about would have been named. And then I go to baby books and look at meanings of names and just kind of go through until I find one that fits. I do try often in books to sort of create new names for some reason, or names that I haven't heard before or haven't read about. And that's kind of a fun little challenge I give myself.
Oh, thank you. Interesting question and interesting answer. So now we go to Claire Lagerwall, and I hope, Claire, I've pronounced your surname properly there. She says, I'd like to ask Kristin a few questions. Her first one is, when you've completed a novel and said goodbye to your characters, what is your process of stepping out of that book's mindset and relaxing before the next book venture?
Hi, Claire. Let's see. You know, readers understand, I think, that we authors are wholly invested in our characters. I mean, by the time I've published a book like, say, Nightingale, I have lived with those characters for 4 years or more, every day, you know, editing, reading, research, creating, you know, fine-tuning the book until it's just what I want it to be. And I work a book a lot. I do a lot of editing. I do a lot of revision. I do a lot of throwing away of material and recasting a story. And the truth is that by the time I am finished with all of that, I have said everything that I have to say about these characters. They have lived in me as long as they get to take up residence. And I think this, you know, sort of goes back to a previous question. I am done with them at the end. That's why I tend not to write sequels. I don't let myself begin the what if that creates the next novel or the next question. I just put them aside and go on and hope that I can go sit on a beach and drink wine somewhere for about 2 weeks and just kind of compress.
That sounds a very good way to relax after a book before the next one. Yeah. Claire's next question is, do you plot meticulously, or do you just have a general framework that develops as you go? Do you sort of kind of,
you know, I've in the I don't know how many years it is now, 30 years I've been writing, I've done it all different ways. In the early part of my career, when I was a young mother and had very little time to write, I did all my research up front, and then I absolutely meticulously outlined every scene, the story. I knew exactly what it was going to be, and I just sat down and wrote it. But over time, as my novels became bigger and my research became greater and my son needed me less, I began to be a little more sort of free-spirited. So now I do the research. It takes about 6 to 9 months. And I come up with a generalized idea of what I want to say. It's primarily thematic, usually. You know, it's like I wanted to understand these, you know, brave women of the French resistance who had fought the occupation. And I don't necessarily have a specific idea as I begin. And I just keep writing until the story feels like the best version of itself for me. So I know the beginning, I know the middle, I know the end, but I don't always know exactly scene by scene how I'm going to get there.
Thank you. Claire's next question is, how many rejections, if any, did you get before being published?
Oh, gosh, Claire, that was a long time ago. Unlike a lot of people, I did not get a lot of rejections. And I think a big part of that was because I am, in a way, harder on myself and harder on my own work than other people are. And so I would read my work, and when I was unpublished and learning, and I could tell that it wasn't good enough. So I didn't waste anyone's time by submitting. I never submitted anything until I was pretty sure that it was going to sell. And so I think my first book, I never submitted at all, and obviously it never sold. And then my second book, it won a big contest and sold. And so I haven't been rejected since then. I do, of course, get rejected now and again, even now, you know, whether it's movie adaptations or whatever. So, you know, being rejected is part of this business one way or the other. And I think, you know, if you are a writer, which Claire, I think maybe you might be, just keep going, you know, just keep writing.
Absolutely. And it's always that, it's that first 10 pages, that first 10 to 50 pages, you just have to get the publisher's attention on that. And if you fall in love with those first 10 pages, you're hooked.
And you know, I'm sorry, I was gonna say, when you're a beginning writer, you hear that, and it's so disheartening because you think, you know, somebody can't tell how good I am by a couple of pages. But the truth is that you can, and it's the same thing when you pick up a book that you want to read. If it doesn't engage you right away, you put it down and find something that does.
Yeah. So Claire's last question is, what do you wish you'd known when your journey started that you know now?
Oh gosh, that's a really interesting question. What do I wish I had known? You know, honestly, Claire, I can't think of anything that I wish I'd known, because one of the remarkable things about this career of writing is the way it has unfolded and has had surprises, both good and bad, at every step along the way, and how much it has taught me about my friends and how I view the world and what I feel is important, and how it has allowed me, as I've grown, to write about the things that I care about, which seem to change every 5 or 10 years. And so the career and writing opens up to sort of encompass who you are. And I don't think I would have wanted to know all those things. I think I wanted to just put one foot in front of the other and do this because I love it, and then be surprised by the journey along the way.
Thank you. And it's been an incredible journey. So the last question from readers is from Zili Michelle Nkosi. From Zili says, have you ever considered collaborating with another author who writes in a similar genre? For example, Lucinda Riley.
From Zili. I hope I said your name right. I have considered collaborating with a girlfriend on writing a book that's sort of wildly out of our wheelhouse, like a young adult novel or something. And I would love to do that, because I actually really love the collaborative part of writing. But the bottom line is, the way my career is going right now, I just don't have time to do anything more than I'm doing, and still be the wife and the mother and the friend and the sister that I want to be. So not yet.
Lovely answer. Thank you. So, Kristin, you have The Four Winds coming out in February 2021. I think everyone would love you to tell us a little bit about this book. I have to say, I have completely fallen in love with this powerful, haunting and thought-provoking story of Elsa Martinelli's incredible journey at such a defining time in America's history. I know it's going to be huge across the world. Do tell us, please.
Well, thank you for all of that. You know, it's funny. This is, I can't remember, this is like novel 26 or something, I think, like that. And I've never had a favorite before. I love some, I like some I wish I had done better on. You know, I have all these, I'm a very analytical person. And I just really fell in love with Elsa, the main character of The Four Winds. I think she's the most complex, most interesting female I've ever created, adult female. Anyway, it's set in the Great Depression, and I think, you know, it turns out, of course, at the moment to be very relevant. I did not, you know, see that coming in. But it's about this very, very hard time in American history, and what I find particularly interesting about it is it's a reminder, I think, worldwide, as we all, you know, fight this pandemic together and struggle to get back to some kind of normalcy, this understanding that we as humans have gone through incredible struggles before and throughout history, and that the answer is really coming together and, you know, showing our spirit and our resilience and believing in ourselves. And so that's what I guess I love at the moment about The Four Winds, is the message it sends about today.
Yeah, thank you. It certainly does that, extraordinarily timely. So now, before we go, we've got some more questions just that have come from the team of publishers, actually, and team of sort of everybody to do with the book. Yeah. And so the first one is, you've written over 20 books. You must have started early. How old were you when you first started writing? And what was the trigger?
This is my strange origin story here. And I just want to stop really quickly and say thank you so much to all of the booksellers in South Africa who have embraced my book, and I really appreciate it. Anyway, I started in kind of a weird way. I wasn't one of those kids who ever wanted to be a writer. I wasn't writing stories all the time. I was just the girl who read constantly. On every family vacation, my dad was yelling at me to get my nose out of the book and look at the Grand Canyon. And so I was just a constant reader. And when I was in my third year of law school, my mother was at the end of her battle with breast cancer. And so she was dying of breast cancer, and she was in the hospital. And I would go visit her every day after classes. And one day I was complaining about some corporate tax I think I was taking. And she said, "Don't worry, you're going to be a writer anyway." And this was absolutely the first time it was ever presented to me, the first time I ever thought about it. And the next thing she said was, "You know, we should write a book together." And I was at the time 25 or 26 years old. And I was too young to understand, I think, fully what I was facing in this moment. And I was scared. And so my mom said, "Let's write this book together." And we decided to do that. And so we, you know, as mothers and daughters do, we immediately started arguing about what kind of book we were going to write. I wanted to write horror, and she wanted to write historical romance. And so, you know, finally she said, "I'm sick, I pick, we're writing historical romance, that's it." And so we started one set in the UK, actually. And so I started doing all the research, and every day after school, I would go to her bedside and bring all this Xerox copies of research that I had done on 18th century. And we sort of imagined this book together. And it really gave us this beautiful bonding time. And unfortunately, she never got to read anything. And after she passed away, I kind of put all these papers in a box because obviously I was becoming a lawyer and I didn't really want to be a writer. I didn't think I had any talent or, ability. And then 2 years later, when I was pregnant, I had a bad pregnancy and I was bedridden for 7 months. And my husband came into the room one day and said, "What about that book that you and Sharon are writing? Why don't you give that a try?" And so I pulled out this box full of all the research. It was like a gift from my mom. And I thought, well, writing a book, how hard can that be? I got 7 months, I'll do it. And somewhere in that process, I fell so in love with writing that I decided, once I had my son, and I decided I would give myself until kindergarten to be a writer. And if I couldn't, so I could be an at-home mom for 5 years. And if I didn't sell, then I'd go back to the law. And I sold my first book when my son was 2. So I have never looked back.
That's a very moving story. I feel quite tearful, I have to say. I mean, it's a wonderful story, and I mean, I should imagine your mum would be so incredibly proud.
I
What
think
thing to be able to do together. Yeah,
he is sitting with a martini somewhere, very happy. And Firefly Lane is the book that I finally sort of dared to tackle the emotions of breast cancer and how it felt, and to understand all of that. And that book was a journey for me to find my mother when I was 40. And I didn't know it at the time, but I began it at the age she was when she was diagnosed, and I finished it at the age she was when she passed away. So I feel like she was guiding that book all along.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think that Kate's experience in that book and the reactions of those around her are incredibly well thought out and incredibly thought-provoking as well. I think it's a sort of incredibly beautiful book about human relationships. So this may be the one. The next question is, which book did you enjoy writing the most and why?
Boy, I guess you have to ask yourself, do you enjoy writing a book because it comes easily, or do you enjoy writing a book because it challenges you? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to attack that. I would say probably that the 2 books, besides the 4 Winds, that ultimately mean the most to me are Firefly Lane and The Nightingale. And it's because those 2 books redefined who I was as a writer to me. I set out to write something in both of those books that I'd never done before and that I didn't know if I was going to be capable of. And I was scared every day. And in the end, I think it's that fear and those 2 books that put me on the path to the career I have now.
Thank you. Now, this is a fun question. You are hosting a dinner in a COVID-19 free world. Who are the 5 people you would invite?
Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go with it's a girls' party. So let's cut it down by 5 right away. And I would want, let's see, interesting conversation and fun. So I'm going to go with Michelle Obama, Anne Rice, because I think she's wild and crazy and I really like her. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because she is my personal spirit animal or whatever. Charlize Theron, because she is sort of redefining, I think, what it means to be a powerful woman in the eye of the storm. And I love that. And Hillary Clinton.
Wow, that would be a great evening.
I think it'd be fun.
So the next question is, do you follow the same routine or writing process for each book you write?
I do follow. I'm a very disciplined, dedicated writer. And on top of that, I really love writing. So even when it's going poorly, I would rather do it than almost anything else. So I follow a pretty strict routine. You know, I wake up, I hopefully go running or walking, and then I work essentially from about 8 to 4 every day. And I do then also take off about 6 weeks a year. So I work like it's a job full time all the time, and then I go on holiday.
Thank
and
you.
I love it.
Just 2 more, 3 more. Who are your favorite authors, and what are you reading at the moment? And what's the best thing you've read during lockdown?
Ooh, the best thing I've read during lockdown. Unfortunately, I've been doing a lot of research during lockdown. I read a book called The Secrets We Kept, about the Dr. Zhivago manuscript. I thought that was a really fun book. I would, of course, talk about Delia Owens again and Where the Crawdads Sing, because I loved that. I loved, what's the exact title of Eleanor Oliphant?
She's completely fine.
Yeah,
Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine.
I loved that book.
Well, The Four Winds is certainly that, as are all the others. And that leads me on to the next question. Was there a reason for setting The Four Winds during the Great Depression?
Was there a reason? There was no big plan or political or socioeconomic impulses behind it. I think what happened was, way back when I was writing The Nightingale, I came across stories of the Dust Bowl, and I realized, you know, let me just go back. So the Dust Bowl is this period in American history in the 30s where sort of the Great Plains of America in the center suffered a terrible drought. And in that drought, windstorms came. And this was during the Great Depression, you know, when 12 million people were out of work. So it was almost this perfect storm of bad news for families who were already barely making it. And it was kind of like The Nightingale when I discovered the stories of the young women who were helping the downed airmen out of France. It felt like this was a part of American history that was defining, but hadn't necessarily been explored a whole lot. And I found that a lot of people didn't know very much about it. And like so much of history, the stories of women are particularly marginalized. And so I just kind of wanted to explore this very, very dark time in American history and try to understand what it was, the confluence of events and opportunities that created what we now call the Greatest Generation. You know, these people who lived through the Dust Bowl, the drought, World War II, all of that, and came out so strong and centered. And I just wanted to write about that for some reason. And I wanted to write about a woman who had been responsible for keeping her children alive during that time, because most of what I had read and had seen was focused on men.
And it was the strength and the value she found in female friendship as well, and also the hardship that, the struggle they overcame. But what was so wonderful I felt about Elsa was that she found a new strength in herself that she probably didn't know she had. Yeah.
Yeah, she was interesting, and because she's probably one of the very few characters I've ever written whose story arc is actually an acceptance of her own self-worth. Usually my characters start out feeling that they're very strong, learning that they aren't, and then, going on with it. Whereas Elsa had been treated so poorly in her life that she just really felt she had no value. And so for her, she was forged by fire in learning who she really was inside, in an effort to protect her children. And she got to fall in love.
Yes, yeah. And so then, the very last question, is there any news on when the film adaptation of The Nightingale will be released?
Well, we've got this brilliant cast. We've got a great director. We've got this beautiful script. They were 2 days away from starting filming in Budapest when COVID shut everything down. And they had talked a little bit about getting it going this fall. But I just, who knows if it's going to be safe. So they still have it scheduled for Christmas next year. And I have to believe that, sometime in the next 8 months, they'll start filming again.
Well, I know it'll be worth the wait.
It will be, I hope.
So before we go, Kristin, I just thank you again, and also everybody else for their questions and, the support, and for joining us today. And Kristin, thank you to you for those wonderful books for the readers to fall in love with, and that booksellers will love to sell. You're a wonderful writer, and I love your writing. So keep safe, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody in South Africa for supporting Wild. Well, it's doing down there with this beautiful,
looking beautiful.
I just love, yes. And I have my Great Alone too, if anyone wants to see it.
Yes.
So thank you to everybody who tuned in today, and to all of you who put this together. It's great seeing you, Trisha.
Yeah, and you as always. We'll meet soon, I'm sure. So keep safe, everyone. Look after yourselves. Thankfully, we have reading to help us through these strange times. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everybody.